The black key in my hand is still counting down, and the system still will not answer me. So I do what I can control. I raid every gate I can reach, and I keep getting stronger. But while I train in Korea, a barrier is spreading around Shinjuku, and someone Yuri Orlov cannot explain is already watching from above. AI Anime and Manga presents. Before we continue, leaving a like and a comment really helps the video reach the right audience. And don't forget to subscribe or join as a YouTube member for early access to new episodes. Now, let's open the stat window. I called up the stat window as soon as I got back home. Stats. My eyes scrolled down past my level, job, titles, and stopped at the list of skills. Skills. Passive skills. Unknown. Level max. Willpower. Level 1. Dagger master. Level max. Active skills. Flash. Level max. Murderous intent. Level 2. Mutilation. Level max. Dagger barrage. Level max. Stealth. Level 2. Ruler's hand. Level max. Many of those on display had either upgraded or were about to upgrade to their ultimate versions. The maximum level for a skill was 3, and once it was reached, the level would change to max. If the proficiency of a maxed out skill kept increasing, it would eventually get upgraded to its final version. The difference in efficiency between the basic and final versions was huge. The skill dash had become flash, fatal strike had become mutilation, and dagger throw had become dagger barrage. Advanced dagger wielding, a passive skill that had helped me handle a dagger skillfully, was now dagger master. I summoned a demon monarch's dagger, spun it on my index finger, and let it slide down my hand and into my palm, where I smoothly gripped it. It was almost as if I was performing a stunt, tack. I was having fun tossing the dagger above my head and grabbing it with a snap of my wrist. It's too bad I don't have an audience. Thanks to the Dagger Master skill, the weapon felt like an extension of my own hand. I looked back at the skill window as I repeatedly threw and caught the dagger. I guess the only skills I can focus on are murderous intent and stealth. Unfortunately, willpower remained at level 1 and was unlikely to ever increase. Skill. Willpower, level 1. Passive skill, no mana required. You have endless willpower. When your stamina falls below 30%, willpower will activate, and you will receive 50% less damage. Willpower activated only when my stamina dipped to 30, but I couldn't put my life at risk to increase one skill. Besides, I dealt with my fair share of dangerous situations even after acquiring willpower, but the skill had stayed at level 1, which meant developing it wouldn't be an easy task. The other problem was that I had become too strong. Could I even find a formidable enough enemy? And so I skipped over willpower. I decided to increase the proficiency of murderous intent and stealth, which had stayed at level 2 since I'd had little opportunity to use them. Murderous intent wasn't the type of skill I could whip out on the regular, but I could use stealth in my daily life. My gaze fixated on the top of the skill window. What the heck is this? I was referring to the unknown designation in the passive skill section. I'd had this since I first became a player, yet no information about it had been revealed. I thought I'd unlock it after a certain amount of time passed, but was there a prerequisite? I had high expectations, since it had been set at the max level when I received it. No matter how much time passed, my curiosity about it never waned. For a moment I just stared at the unanswered skill. Eventually I shook my head and continued down the window to what I really wanted to check. Right below the regular skills were the job-exclusive skills that had increased one level today. Job-exclusive skills. Active job-exclusive skills. Shadow Extraction, Level 2. Shadow Storage, Level 2. Monarch's Domain, Level 2. Shadow Exchange, Level 2. I wonder how much has changed. I clicked through all except Shadow Exchange, which I'd already looked at. Skill. Shadow Extraction, Level 2. Job-exclusive skill. No mana required. Extracts mana from a body whose life has come to an end and transforms it into a shadow soldier. Odds of extraction failure rise depending on the target's stats and the amount of time between death and extraction. Active shadow extraction, 590 out of 1300. Level 2 buff, augmentation. The possibility of shadow enhancement has increased. The shadow extraction limit had jumped a lot due to the level increase. I can summon 1300 of them now. If there were enough extractable shadows around, I could more than double my army. Additionally, the special augmentation buff increased the chances for a shadow soldier's level to go up instantly following an extraction. Like I thought. It hadn't been a coincidence that Jima, a boss-level magic beast, had spawned at level 13. What if enhancement had kicked in when I summoned Baru? He would have been even more terrifying than he was now. They do say that there's no end to humans' greed. I smiled as I checked shadow storage in Monarch's domain. The performance of each had increased greatly, and buffs had been added. Awesome. I closed the stat window, satisfied. My growth as a hunter was slowing down, but the fact that I could still go farther gave me a rush. I wanted to climb higher. I don't know where the top of the mountain is, but I felt elated every time I improved. Ba-dump, ba-dump. I sent my dagger to the inventory and put my right hand on my chest. Ba-dump, ba-dump. I found the sound of my beating heart pleasing. But why did Hunter Min refer to this as terrifying? I recalled what Haein had told me a few hours ago. Hunter Min had warned me to be careful, as I possessed a frightening power. Was he talking about the system? I had also initially feared what was happening to me and the system generating the abnormalities, but the feeling had quickly faded as I got used to the system and started considering it a useful tool, though it was concerning that there were still so many mysteries. The silence around me felt heavier than before. I looked up at the empty space. What in the world are you? There was no reply. Isn't it about time you answered me? I waited for an answer that didn't come. Inventory. I took out a shining black key. Item, Cartenon Temple Key. Acquisition difficulty, revealed after the allotted time passes. Remaining time, 249:25:07. This was an invitation from the system. A week had flown by, and fewer than 250 hours now remained. What kind of answer will I find here? I felt an equal mixture of anticipation and curiosity. As my heart started pounding again, I dropped my hand from my chest. I resolved to make thorough preparations until the time was up. I grabbed the phone and quickly made a call. Jinho answered cheerfully.
What's up, boss?
I got straight to the point. Hey, Jinho.
Yes, boss.
Can you book all the high-ranked dungeons in the area starting tomorrow?
You mean like the time we did those C-rank dungeon raids, boss?
Yeah, exactly. Jinho considered this for a moment before replying enthusiastically.
Will do, boss.
Yuri Orlov, the S-rank hunter from Russia, was met with a huge crowd at the airport when he landed in Japan. He smirked as the sight reminded him of a swarm of ants. Personnel from the Hunters Association of Japan approached him with their heads bowed, as if they were ashamed that they needed to rely on foreign help to prevent a disaster in their home country. Up until a few weeks ago, Japan had criticized Korea for that exact shortcoming, but here was Japan, forced to do the same. None of the representatives of the association, including President Matsumoto, could bring themselves to raise their heads as they reflected on their past attitude. If we hadn't lost those hunters on Jeju Island, President Matsumoto bit his lower lip. Yuri Orlov, it's Yuri. Reporters from all over the world started snapping pictures as soon as they spotted the Russian. Kashak shak 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 shak. Yuri smiled widely to show off his gold tooth. The entry papers were processed at lightning speed, and the first job the Japanese government requested of their recruit was to reassure the citizens of Japan. Yuri readily agreed. People called him savior due to the large number of gates he'd blocked to prevent dungeon breaks. He didn't mind the nickname because of the money and fame that accompanied it. A Japanese staffer asked Yuri, "Are you ready, Mr. Orlov?" Yuri answered, "Of course." That same evening, they whisked him to a TV station. Everyone in Japan was glued to their sets to watch his interview. The host asked Yuri, "How are you planning to block the gate?" "My usual way," he replied, completely at ease. He used both hands to draw a big circle in the air. "I'm going to put a huge divination circle, like this, around the gate." The broadcast switched to a shot of the Shinjuku gate, then showed it with a 3D image of a divination circle superimposed. "And once I pour my mana into it, that'll be it. Whatever's inside won't be able to escape." However, his explanation wasn't enough to put the Japanese people at ease. The host tilted his head. "Excuse me, but are you sure that's possible?" Yuri's eyebrows twitched. "What do you mean?" The host took care not to offend Yuri as he elaborated. "I mean, It's a little hard to believe that only one S-rank hunter can block the S-rank gate. Yuri smirked. The host was relieved that the seemingly hot-headed hunter was laughing, but the host was still anxious that he'd gotten on the Russian's nerves. However, Yuri's grin didn't slip. If I was maintaining it solely with my mana, then yes, it would be an impossible feat. Impossible. The host swallowed hard. Since the Japanese S-rank hunters had given up on the raid, if Yuri also threw in the towel, that would be the end of the line for Japan. Yuri reveled in how his interviewer stiffened before continuing. However, my ability is that my divination circles are powered by absorbing the magic around them. The host flinched and his expression immediately softened. So when you say you only need to use your mana at first, it's like starting a car engine. Once the divination circle is activated, it's fueled by the mana around it, and the circle becomes like a huge, sturdy castle wall. The faces of the host and the show's crew lit up as Yuri explained how it worked. The Russian's voice was filled with confidence and reassurance. Those listening to him felt their anxiety melting away. If what he said was true, his barrier would grow stronger as the magic power around the barrier increased. An incredible amount of magic power emanated from the S-rank gate, and with Yuri's barrier encompassing it, the threat would be trapped by its own power. It was like being struck down by its own sword. This barrier would be the strongest ever recorded in history. Yuri stabbed his finger toward the camera and viewers as he proclaimed, "I will save you, so you just remember who's rescuing you from doom." Beep. The TV shut off and President Go of the Hunters Association of Korea put down the remote control, his expression displeased. Jinho sat beside him and asked,
"What do you think, sir?"
I don't know.
President Go was worried as he leaned back on the couch. Unlike a certain Japanese man, President Go would never laugh at his neighbor's misery. Of course, he also had no intention of helping this neighbor at the risk of his own country either.
I'm not sure whether Yuri Orlov can block the gate,
President Go's gaze was shrewd.
but I know what will happen if he fails.
I'm glad, though.
President Go looked at Jinho without a word. The A-rank hunter realized how his words could have been perceived and hastily waved his hand.
I didn't mean I was glad this happened to Japan.
After a short pause, Jinho continued.
I meant I'm relieved that we at least have a reliable hunter.
President Go vehemently nodded in agreement. No need to name the hunter to which Jinho was referring. His presence alone was extremely reassuring.
Oh, right. How's he doing nowadays?
Jinho handed his superior a printout listing the high-rank gates that had recently appeared in Seoul and the surrounding area of Gyeonggi-do.
Why are you suddenly giving me this?
Do you see everything circled in red?
It looks like about half of the listed dungeons.
Jinho wiped the sweat off his forehead.
The Ahjin Guild has requested permits for all those gates.
President Go was taken aback.
All these?
Yes, sir.
Jinho was an elite A-rank hunter and the top dog of the surveillance team, a man whose power was unrivaled in the association except by President Go himself. Seeing as how such a hunter had been shocked by how powerful Jinwoo's minions were, this tight schedule might not be a problem for Jinwoo and his hundreds of soldiers. But why was he in such a rush? President Go's brow furrowed. Had it been any other hunter, he would have tried to stop them, even if he had to go in person. I can't imagine Hunter Sung getting injured inside an A or B rank dungeon. Jinho had said he'd felt bad for those magic beasts, hadn't he? President Go nodded with a chuckle.
If there are no issues, give Hunter Sung what he wants.
The Hunters Association was thankful there was a hunter taking the initiative to deal with magic beasts, provided of course that there was little need to worry about him getting hurt.
I think there might be a problem.
You're talking about the fact that the gates are under the large guild's jurisdiction.
That's right, sir.
There were a total of 3 large guilds operating in metropolitan Seoul: White Tiger, the Hunters, and the Reapers. Each had a designated territory and took care of gates that spawned therein. But if the Ahjin Guild suddenly started encroaching on their turf, they would have something to say about the new driving out the old. Conflict should be expected. The two men came to the same conclusion. However, a smile graced the president's features. I thought President Go was on Hunter Sung's side, Jinho curiously asked.
What's made you so happy, sir?
Well, if you think about it, Jinwoo's new guild has only 3 members and just one of them is a fighter. Even so, they're as good as any of the large guilds while disregarding their territorial claims. I find that amusing.
Jinchul agreed.
I feel the same.
Did the Ahjin Guild tell you what they were up to?
They've asked to be allowed to handle the gates around Seoul for 1 week.
1 week.
Jinwoo had saved the lives of the guildmasters on Jeju Island, so it shouldn't be difficult for those large guilds to make an exception for a week. The unusual thing is, it might not seem that way to Jinwoo, but the schedule he'd set was extremely tight for the average person. It can't be about money. Had that been Jinwoo's goal, there were better ways. He could have made an astronomical sum had he chosen to work for the United States or China. Even in Korea, Jinwoo could have joined an established guild. Then why? President Go's gaze fell on Jinchul.
Why do you think Hunter Sung wants to do so many raids?
Jinchul briefly thought about it before responding.
I have one theory.
President Go hadn't been expecting an actual answer, so his subordinate had his attention.
What is it?
Hunter Sung looked very happy while hunting magic beasts.
He looked happy?
Yes, sir.
Jinchul recalled the Hunters Guild raid with the High Orcs. Hunter Sung had looked like he was having fun at the time.
He seemed especially delighted when he killed the boss-level magic beast.
He finds joy in defeating a powerful magic beast.
Something Jinwoo had mentioned before came back to Go. I want to hunt magic beasts, and that's exactly what he was doing. What an interesting young man, and what a great person he was. At that moment, the landline of the president's office rang. President Go's secretary spoke through the phone. Sir.
What is it?
The secretary replied, there's a call from the Hunter Command Center in the U.S.
The U.S.?
And the Hunter Command Center to boot. President Go frowned. Why is the Hunter Command Center calling the president of the Hunters Association? A superpower such as the United States wouldn't call Korea for assistance, so what could it be?
Patch them through.
2 seconds later, another person's voice came over the phone. This is Adam White from the Hunter Command Center.
This is President Gunhee Go of the Hunters Association of Korea.
Speaking English was one of the basic skills required of any good businessman. President Go spoke fluent English, and he was much better at it than Japanese, which he'd used only briefly when he was younger.
What kind of business does the Hunter Command Center have with us?
Adam got straight to the point. The Hunter Command Center is planning an event early next month and will invite the best hunters from all over the world.
Yes, and?
Adam replied, we would like to invite Hunter Sung as the Korean representative. Before starting the raids in earnest, I searched for another guild that could handle selling the different kinds of loot from high-ranked dungeons. We could handle it ourselves if we only did a raid once every few days, but in order to stick to their tight schedule, Jinho, the rookie vice president, needed help, and it would benefit the Ahjin Guild to partner with another guild instead of finding a middleman. The problem is which to choose. I considered the White Tiger Guild, with which I'd had plenty of past interactions, or Haein's Hunters Guild, but I ultimately chose the Knights Guild. I'd already worked with them before, and since the Knights were stationed in Busan, their activities wouldn't overlap with Ahjin's. I called them early in the evening. Jungsu, the president of the Knights Guild, was lying on the couch and laughing at some TV show. He picked up his vibrating phone from the armrest without much thought. Huh? Jinwoo Sung, Hunter. Jungsu's eyes widened at the caller ID, and he quickly sat up and accepted the call. Jungsu answered, yes. I introduced myself. This is Jinwoo Sung from the Ahjin Guild. Jungsu replied, oh yes, this is Jungsu Park of the Knights Guild. I asked, do you have time to talk right now? Jungsu answered, of course. His smile grew wider and wider as he listened to Jinwoo's proposition. Jungsu had been feeling disappointed that his plan to develop a closer relationship with Jinwoo had been ruined by the new regulations. His idea to combine the Knights Guild's prior experience and Hunter Sung's abilities had gone down the drain. Vice President Yoon-tae had also been upset by the turn of events. So this abrupt outreach was very welcome. Jungsu said, yes, of course, that's not a problem. A grin never left his voice. Please leave it to us. Managing loot from dungeons would be a simple task for the experienced Knights Guild. After all, this was why they had a separate processing team. Jungsu beamed. Then I'll see you tomorrow. The lunch my mom had packed for me was delicious, despite the fact that I was eating it inside a dungeon filled with magic beasts. Jinho looked around as he chewed.
Eating lunch like this reminds me of the time we spent in those C-rank dungeons, boss.
I laughed. You might want to swallow before you talk.
Sorry, boss.
But I understood how Jinho felt. There'd been a time when we had booked all the available gates we could find and had spent the day zipping from dungeon to dungeon. The only difference between then and now was that the gates had gone from C rank to B rank or higher. And if I was nitpicking, my gaze drifted to Igris. Igris noticed me staring and politely bowed. We have a lookout while we eat. Not that I needed someone to watch out for me. Thanks to my high perception stat, I could sense movements in the dungeon even if I wasn't paying attention, which meant I could deal with a magic beast nearby with my eyes closed. However, I preferred not having my meal interrupted, and wanting Jinho to feel at ease, I posted guards during meal times. I looked in the other direction. This time, my gaze landed on Iron. Iron met my gaze and pounded his chest hard, as if to indicate that he had things under control. Clung, clung. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed throughout the cave. I shook my head. That dude's problem is he's too intense. Jinho glanced toward the source of the commotion and suddenly asked a question.
Boss?
Yeah?
Your minions can move on their own, right?
Yeah, something like that. Hunter Min had mentioned something about shadow soldiers having their own identities. I don't know how much of that I should believe, though. Jinho went on.
So why not let your minions continue the raid while we eat or when you're otherwise preoccupied, boss?
No, I can't do that. I earned fewer experience points the farther I was from my soldiers. But as I wasn't about to bother explaining stuff like experience points to Jinho, I put on a serious expression. Who knows what they'll get up to if I'm not around?
Oh!
I could almost hear Jinho's stomach drop as the vice president lost his appetite. But that was enough joking around. Should I try out this skill now? I finished my lunch and laid down my spoon. Skill, Shadow Storage. Level 2, Job Exclusive Skill. No mana required. Shadow soldiers can be stored by absorbing them into the caster's shadow. Stored soldiers can be summoned or reabsorbed at any time. Number of shadows stored, 840 out of 840. Level 2 buff, Sensory Sharing. A stored shadow soldier can share their senses with the host. The buff Sensory Sharing had been added to the shadow storage skill. It was a unique ability that allowed a soldier to relay its senses to the caster, so it was quite handy for checking on a situation from a distance. I closed my eyes. Sensory Sharing. I felt linked to the shadow soldiers outside the dungeon that were located throughout Korea. I spread out quite a lot of them. I picked one at random. It happened to be the shadow soldier I had placed with Haein. I heard water hitting the floor. It's not raining, so what's the water sound? My confusion was short-lived, and my eyes shot open as soon as I caught sight of Haein's naked body surrounded by steam. Jinho flinched at my reaction.
Boss? Did you nod off for a bit?
No, it's nothing. I shook my head. I briefly considered taking Haein out for dinner sometime as an apology.
Oh, hey, boss. Did you hear?
About what?
You know, the S-rank gate in Shinjuku. People are expecting there to be a dungeon break there tomorrow.
Time had flown by. I nodded. It's already been 6 days since we started raiding these high-ranked dungeons. During that time, I hadn't been twiddling my thumbs. Slowly but surely, I had gathered experience points, and I'd advanced from 101 to 103 as a result. That was my reward for dropping everything and focusing solely on leveling up. I called up the black key from inventory. Thea. It appeared in the palm of my hand. Item, Cartenon Temple Key. Acquisition difficulty, revealed after the allotted time passes. Remaining time, 26:51:49. Just 1 day left. I gripped the key tightly. My heart fluttered whenever I laid eyes on it. Stop.
Huh?
Jinho, who had kept sneaking peeks at Igris and Iron because of my little prank, jumped in surprise. Not you. The shadow soldiers stopped in their tracks at my command. Grrr, grrr. Fanged beasts carrying weapons, such as sickles and swords, emerged from the other side of the cave. I slowly rose to my feet as I stared them down. Just 1 more day. I still have 24 hours, I smirked as I wrapped my hand around a demon monarch's dagger. The night before the dungeon break, a huge divination circle encompassed Shinjuku, courtesy of Yuri. No one had ever seen such a massive circle before. Citizens had already been evacuated from the area, but Yuri had stayed behind to perform final checks on the barrier. The Japanese personnel watched the hunter nervously, paying attention to his every word and action. Yuri rubbed his chin and frowned. This is weird. The interpreter's eyes widened. Huh? Was there an error? Yuri replied. No, it's not that. The barrier had been perfectly cast. Yuri was certain this would be the pinnacle of his abilities. I can sense someone in the vicinity, the interpreter asked. What? Why else would his heart be beating so fast? Yuri scanned the area and yelled at the top of his lungs. Who are you? Where are you hiding? But there was no answer to his voice ringing through the empty streets. Silence answered him. The staff member wiped the sweat from his forehead and forced a smile. There shouldn't be anyone left, since the dungeon break is tomorrow, right? The Russian sneered at him. I didn't say it was a human, did I? The staff member asked. I beg your pardon. Yuri cast a pitying glare at the pale Japanese man before turning away. Maybe it was just my imagination. But at the same time, a hooded man watched the Russian from atop a tall building in the distance. He's very perceptive. Considering where Yuri's power originated, it made sense. The onlooker's gaze shifted to the more important matter, the S-rank gate. A silent, unpleasant energy encircled it. For a moment, the rooftop stayed silent. The man removed his hood, revealing an Asian male in his late 30s. His bushy, unkempt beard gave away his identity. It was Ilhwan Sung. He regarded the gate with regret before flipping his hood back up. Finally, it begins. Everything was progressing as planned.